Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Utterly Unscripted. Today, I am joined by Jennifer Moore. Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Jesse. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. I'll be honest, I was a little scared. I haven't told you this yet. I was a little scared because I saw your profile. For those that don't know, we matched together on a podcast guest and hosting web forum platform thing. Brand new to me, so I'm not up with the tech words. But when I read it and I thought, I wonder if so you ticked all the boxes and then there was one little keyword and I went, oh, actually maybe Jennifer doesn't want to talk to me.
Oh,
But I insisted on sending the message because I thought, actually, I think you will want to talk to me. I am an ally. I am all about empowerment of everyone, but in particular, and especially right now, empowering women. I come from a
mm-hmm.
family of women. I was the only male in my family for a very long time. So I've always been surrounded by women. I am in tune with the female energy. And I thought, actually, no, I'm going to ask Jennifer to come on the show because there's plenty of things that I think we can talk about. Would you introduce yourself to the audience and let us know
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm
who you
so
are?
glad. I just want to say I'm so glad that you overcame your concerns or your fear that I was going to say no, because I'm just thrilled to be here. And
Thank you.
it just feels like a divine appointment to me. So, my name is Jennifer Moore. My website is empathicmastery.com, and I am an author, a mentor, a teacher, and a healer for highly sensitive, empathic, mostly women, but some men as well. And
Hmm.
I identify as a former hot mess and world class awfulizer, somebody who really had to learn the hard way not
Yeah.
to take on all the thoughts, feelings, energy, sensations, and agony of the world around me. And by sort of learning this, I figured out how to live a life that, can I swear or
Yes, you may.
say okay? I figured out how to live a life that doesn't suck,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
support other people in living lives that really let them share their magic with the world and really shine, as opposed to kind of playing small, hiding their light under a bushel, and just not
Mm.
knowing why they're feeling so overwhelmed and distressed like 24/7.
Right. And I think now that is more important than ever. We're
More
all
than
feeling it.
important
I
than
get it.
more important than ever.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think that with the crisis or crises that are going on the planet right now, that
Mm.
more and more people are waking up to their empathic sensitivity, waking up to the fact that we are, I believe very strongly, that we are all cells in the body of this planet, and that we are interconnected, that we are
Yeah.
not individuals, but we are part of a living organism that is this earth, and that we have been so disconnected from this for such a long period of time that we've really been
Yeah.
compartmentalizing and stuffing down our emotions and feelings. But with COVID, with all of the wars that have been breaking out here in the United States, with all of the political unrest and the racial and sex and like this sexism that's happening,
Mm.
all these things are bringing up this quality of emotion for people, that's bringing up grief, it's bringing up fear, it's bringing up anger, and we can't compartmentalize anymore. And what I'm seeing is more and more people are becoming more and more sensitive to the
Mm.
energy of the world around them.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. Would you say that maybe the reason that people are becoming more in tune is because we're so overloaded? Like now in 2022, it's very different. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. So for me, I was not bombarded with news 24/7. I was not bombarded with news from everywhere. I had friends all over the world. We traveled a lot. So I knew people everywhere, but it wasn't like it is today. Now, if I want to talk to somebody who's in the US, number one, it isn't going to cost me $200 on a phone bill. Number two, I don't have to write a letter. I can get on the phone or I can hop onto Facebook or whatever. So we have this instant gratification thing, which I think that's led to its own problems, actually. But
Yes, yes. Well, and I think the thing is, you speak about this idea of, thinking about the speed up of information and
mm,
even the difference between, your childhood experience, and I'm a little bit older than you, and my childhood experience. I mean, I think about the days when if you wanted to get something, like you said, if you wanted to call somebody on the phone, you could expect to spend hundreds of dollars if you were even, I mean, even in the United States, it used to be if you were calling out of your area code, if you were
yeah,
calling out of your region, you could end
yeah,
up with like a $50 phone bill in like 1975, which
yes,
would have
yeah,
been outrageous.
of
But
course.
we have these, we had the tech, everything was so much slower. You mailed, you would order something from a mail order company. Maybe you could call it in and give them a credit card number, but half the time you'd have to send the order form. It would have to arrive there. Then they would say three, instead of it being 3 to 5 business days, it was basically like 3 to 6 weeks for delivery.
Yeah,
People were just accustomed to that. If,
yeah,
and then thinking even further back to when the only way information got to people was there wasn't even telegrams. It was all word of mouth and people riding on a horse from one town to another.
yeah,
The amount of
yeah.
time it took for us to discover that there was some major disaster going on, now it's like
You've got it right
instant.
away. Yeah.
And I think that one of the big problems is that while we are able to be a global community, like you and I are having this conversation, I'm in Maine, you're in Australia, and
Mm,
it's like we're in the same room with each other.
that's right.
That's, I think, the awesome thing about this. But I think the thing that is so challenging is that now we are getting instant, like rapid fire information about everything that is going on the planet
Mhm.
all at the same time.
All the
And
time.
I don't think our nervous systems are built for this. We are not meant to know about every single agony and every single disaster and every single misery. And
Mm,
it seems to me that what happens is then we start to feel incredibly responsible and start to feel a sense of overwhelm and also a sense of guilt about like what should we be doing, when really it's only been within the last, I don't know, like probably this rapidity of information is like maybe 10 years, like maybe
yeah,
5 years,
yeah.
yeah.
I wouldn't
So
even well, I'm thinking 10 years ago, it's hard to remember what I was doing 10 years ago. Uh, sometimes I think, "Oh, was I even here 10 years ago?" But,
right.
um, I I think actually, yeah, 10 years ago was maybe the start of being able to get that. I was traveling. So 10 years ago, I was, uh, I'm just trying to think. I was in Europe for a
Hmm.
short time. So I maybe spent about 4 months in Europe. I had an iPhone, I had my MacBook computer, but I still needed to seek out whatever it was. If I wanted to know something, I had to seek it out for myself. We had Facebook,
Yes,
we had, I think we had Twitter, I'm not sure. Um,
we definitely
Probably.
had Twitter.
We
I
did
actually
have
got
Twitter? Okay.
involved. I actually was one of the early adopters of Twitter. I since have like walked away from it because it's really
Uh-huh.
turned into the most
It's really
bizarre thing
toxic.
ever.
Yeah,
It's
it's very
gotten really
toxic.
toxic, but there was a
Yeah.
point where Twitter was this amazing community of like-minded people where you could find your, like I was a raw foodist at the time, and I found the entire, like I was connected to this entire amazing
Oh,
community of raw food
yeah.
people. And we were like all interconnecting, and I think I started engaging with Twitter in about 2005, 2006.
Okay, so yeah.
But there's such, I mean, thinking about it, the difference, like thinking about Facebook, thinking about Twitter, thinking about like live journal, like that was one of the first places where I
I
started
remember that.
engaging
Yeah.
online. And there was a slowness to it. Like it would be
Mhm.
like you'd post your blog, the people who'd be responding would be the people who were relevant to you, who were following you, who cared about you.
Yeah.
There was sort of this interconnection. And this was actually something I was talking with one of my mentees about earlier today, was how now with the algorithms, it used to be if you posted a picture on Instagram or you posted something on Facebook or did something on Twitter or did a blog post or something, your friends and family, and maybe if you had grown an audience, your followers would
Mhm.
respond and say something. But now it's like, because of the algorithm, it's like so many of our personal posts aren't even noticed by our friends and family. And we're just
Mm,
inundated with what the algorithm thinks we want to see,
yeah.
but it's not necessary. And it just adds to this level of stress
Yes.
that is
Yeah.
so different now. Yeah.
And I think that that has a lot to do at the end of the day, I think that is really important. I am on Facebook, I am on Twitter for me to engage with the audience and with my guests and get the message out there. I think it's like, oh, what do they call it? The necessary evil or
Yes.
something, you
Necessary
know?
evil.
Yeah,
Yes.
necessary evil. I feel like we have to have it because without it, how are we going to get the message out there? And we have some important messages. And my podcast in particular, I actually hope that I'm generating some nice important messages for people. Look, I have shenanigans too. I don't know who if you've listened to any of the any of the podcast episodes that I've released in the last few days, they get pretty blue. So there's fun,
Wonderful. Uh-huh.
we have fun, but I also think that within the fun, there's something for everyone. There's always going to be something, and that was my
Always going to be
main.
something for everyone.
Yeah, there's
You know, I'd
always going
love
to be
to
something.
I'd love to offer a reframe about the idea of the necessary evil with things like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And what I would love to say is, I actually believe two things. One, we can curate our social media experience.
Hmm.
And for people who are highly sensitive and empathic, curating the social media experience is essential, because it
Yes.
is a cesspool if you
Oh
just go
yeah.
into the like if you just walk into the main
Let
room
it happen.
and let energy fly at you,
Yeah,
it's a shit show.
it is a
But
shit show.
we
Yeah.
can deliberately curate that. And what I want to offer as a reframe is, it's people like you and me who are continuing to show up in places like Facebook, show up in places like Twitter, show up in places like, Instagram, where instead of buy my thing, or, get irate and angry and double down
Mm,
on the cray, instead of that, what we are offering is, we are offering beacons of light, we are offering beacons of hope, and we are offering solutions. And I
yeah.
think that the thing is that if everybody uh, evacuates and leaves these places, and it's just left to the haters, then
Mm,
sadly our voices don't get heard. And I actually think, you were
I
saying
agree.
about one of your deep missions right now is to support women, as we are
Mm.
in this wild, wild
I mean, talk
time.
about a shit show. That
Talk
I
about a
mean,
shit show.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
God bless America. We are in it right now.
Yeah.
And what I also think is that right now, our magic is needed more than ever before.
Mm,
But it is so easy to get disempowered, to be fall into despair, to find ourselves getting lost
yeah.
in just fear and worry and anguish, and stop speaking, stop sharing. And I really believe that the bullies and that the powers that benefit from capitalism and from consumerism and from people feeling disempowered, that they
Mhm.
want us to be quiet. They want us to
Yeah,
just walk away. They want
yeah.
us to take our voice out of the equation. And if anything, I feel so strongly that right now we need to be sharing our voices. We
Yes.
must be taking up
Oh, yeah.
space.
Now
Yeah.
you need to be as loud as ever, and you said it yourself, and, one of my previous guests, Corey Nathan, the very beginning of his podcast, so he has a podcast called Talking Politics and Religion Without Killing Each Other, and I love it.
Ooh.
I think it's wonderful. It's such a great show. Please go and check it out if you're interested.
Amazing. That sounds wonderful.
Check
Yeah.
out the talk that I had with him. He grew up as a Jewish guy. So he was
Mhm.
in an observant Jewish family, and in his 20s decided to convert and become a quote unquote born again Christian. And so
Mm.
his story is about, I guess, well, I compared it to a coming out story because I can relate to that, I guess. Um that was how I felt the energy would have been like. You have to come out. You have to tell your parents, I am no longer what our
Yes.
family believe we are. I've decided to go in this other direction. But his podcast is wonderful. He has people from all over the place, and he says it the it's the best way I've heard so far. It is a place where we can talk without the people who are the loudest taking the oxygen out of the room so that we can't have our say, because there are plenty of people who can talk politics and religion literally without killing each other. It doesn't have to be a war. It doesn't have to be nasty all the time, and you can be on opposing sides of opinion. But it's I guess at the end of the day, it's about being respectful with each other, and
Exactly.
that's what we're missing when we look at the things that are on social media. Especially, like we said, Twitter is a cesspool, and I don't even know how half the shit I see on Twitter gets to be on my timeline. I don't know whether it's because it listens maybe it listens to me in private or something. Here's some of the things that I'm saying, but some of the stuff I just don't get it. And I like your idea. I want to be able to curate my social media experience, and one of the best ways that I've seen that in action is with TikTok. I've
Mm,
firsthand noticed how the algorithm looks at what you are looking at, what you are listening to, and I've been to the dark side of TikTok. It, I don't even know how I got there, because you like one video of a guy proposing to his boyfriend, and all of a sudden you're bombarded with videos that are that way that way related, but then it evolves into something else. And before I knew it, I was looking at stuff that I thought, how did I get here?
right. How
I
did I
I
get
don't want to
here?
see this stuff. I don't want to see this stuff. And so I actually called out to my friends who I know are on TikTok, and that's normally I look at their stuff. Um and I said to them, start sending me animal videos. I want to see animals. I want to see nice things again. I don't want to be seeing all of this sexual tension, and I don't want to be seeing all this hatred or any. I like to call it angst, is what I like to call
Yes.
it, because it
Yes.
feels like people are projecting their, and it's okay, but I tend to absorb that as well.
Yes.
I tend to take that
Yes.
on very easily, and I don't want all of that. So people started sending me videos of animals and things that I like to see, and all of a sudden now, every time I open TikTok, I see beautiful animals everywhere. It's a happy place again.
It is a happy place again, and yeah, my husband sends me animal videos on Instagram every single
Uh-huh.
night, and so I've got a fair bit of animal videos showing up, but then I noticed that, like, you like, or you respond to, or you scroll by, or you watch one thing, and then it's sort of you're
Mhm.
down this bizarro rabbit
Yeah,
hole, and you're going, "How in God's name did I get these things?" Like,
exactly.
it really is a quite the spectacular journey in social media. And I think what I realized is that we need to not just curate it once and be good, but we need to constantly adapt and curate, because
Yeah, you do.
I, right after Roe versus Wade shifted, I had maybe watched one or two videos with people giving information. And so suddenly Instagram is just like,
You're
hey, we
bombarded
think
by
you
it.
want to see this thing. And I'm just like, I want to be mindfully aware of what's going on. And I also know that I have to be very, very deliberate about
Mm,
what I expose myself to, because when I get overwhelmed, I just, like, I'll start to spin out. I'll start to
yeah,
feel
you do.
panic. I'll start to feel anxiety.
Mm,
I'll start to feel all these things. And actually, something you said just sort of reminded me of something, is that one of the things that I'm noticing that a lot of people are doing right now is that they are making predictive statements about the future. They are not
yes.
saying, I'm scared that we're going to go down that we are heading towards some kind of disaster. I'm scared that women's rights are going to be taken away. I'm scared that the climate emergency is going to become worse.
Mm,
Instead, what I see so many people doing is they make declarative statements about something they are feeling an emotion about. But instead of owning it and feeling it themselves and claiming it for what it is, their
mhm.
fear, they are projecting it out and making these statements of, well, America's going to hell in a handbasket, or,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, women's rights are lost. Everything,
yeah, yeah.
we're back in the dark ages now. And the thing about it is, there's something so, in my opinion, so disempowering about this choice, about this approach to things, because
Mm,
what we do is we project all of our all of our emotions, all of our fear, all of our stuff. We project it outside of ourselves, and we externalize it as something that is something outside of ourselves, instead of sitting with our grief, sitting with our fear, sitting with our anger, sitting with our anguish,
mm,
and saying, I feel really sad about this right now. I feel really
yeah.
scared about this right now. I feel really angry about this. And just, if you just try this on, like if you think about something that you've been worried about with a current event or something, and you just try on, if you say to yourself, I feel really scared that this could come to pass, that's a really, really different feeling than
Mhm.
saying, oh, I just know that this is going to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, my thoughts and my feelings, or my expectations are just that, but instead of projecting them as truth, own them as what they are, which are thoughts, feelings, anguish, anxiety. Yeah.
And the thing is, I'm a magically oriented person. I have a lot of training in sort of magic and metaphysics.
Mm,
What we declare is what we amplify. And so
yeah,
if we keep on, especially the people who don't want these things to come to pass, when people keep saying things like, oh, America
yeah.
is just, democracy is done, America's going to hell in a handbasket, like, when we keep making these declarative statements about things we do not want to come to pass,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
are actually enabling them. We are
Yes.
actually, like, we are amplifying something we don't even want.
No.
Whereas when we just own the feeling, we diffuse it, and we allow ourselves to sit with it. So
Mm,
this has been something that I've been very, very mindful of. And I've really been thinking a lot about my language, in terms
mm,
of, am I speaking projectively, or am I speaking from, really owning my stuff?
yes.
And I've also, even just with the curating too, just really looking at, how are the people who I'm listening to expressing themselves? Are they owning their feelings? Are they taking responsibility for what's going on? Are they being present with themselves? Or are they projecting into it? And also, the other thing I really look for in social media are the people who are offering solutions, and actually
Mhm.
saying, this is something you can do,
This is what we can do. Yeah.
this is what we can do, as opposed to the way that right now it's like, there's just so much pointing out the problem, pointing out the problem, pointing out the problem.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
for those of us who are highly sensitive and empathic, this is crippling, this is
Mm.
paralyzing. And as you're talking, I'm sort of imagining you probably qualify in that category of, empathic person as well.
I have been told that. Um, there's two things that I want to quickly just touch on. Um, you said it already with putting the stuff out there. There's actually an episode coming up, and it's I recorded it a while ago, so I'll have to let you know when it comes out. But I do recall a conversation that we had where we need to be very specific with the things that we put out as wanting to come back to us. So our goals and our expectations need to be very specific, because what you put out there is going to come back to you. And it was in a completely different context, but it's the same thing. It means the
It
same
is.
thing.
It
You know, if
is.
you
It
want
is. It's
things to happen, your intentions need to be very specific.
very specific and very impeccable. There's
Yes.
we
Yeah.
really need to be impeccable in there's a book called The Four Agreements, which I really love, and one of the
Hmm.
four agreements is, be impeccable with your word. And
Mm,
we absolutely need to be mindful and impeccable about what we are saying, how we are saying it, and how we are putting it out into the world, because
yeah.
it does amplify and it does come back. The other thing that I've just really been noticing for myself is how incredibly important it is for me to be centered in my own emotions and in my own truth, as opposed to letting myself be pulled all around, kind of like pulled around by the tail or by the ear by
Yeah.
other people's, like, and especially by marketing machines that manipulate human beings emotionally so they will buy things.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
that's so much of what's going on right now, is that the machine is all about spend money, spend money, spend money, spend money.
Yeah.
And the way that they get us to spend money is to get us to feel destabilized and to get us to feel like we are lacking, that we are missing something,
You're
and that
missing.
the
Yeah. Mm.
solution is either through drinking this alcohol, buying this dress, taking
Mm.
this program, doing whatever. And I think that it's so incredibly important for us to not just think about how we don't want to feel, but really start thinking about how do we want to feel.
Yeah.
And I really believe that one of the most radical things we can do right now is feel pleasure, pursue
Mhm.
pleasure, allow
Yeah.
ourselves, like to go for the ecstatic bliss of being in a human body. That
Mm.
this is the antidote. This is part
Yeah.
of the solution. That we're not going to make the world better by worrying about it. We're going to make the world better through our joy, through our pleasure, through great sex, like through
Yeah.
all kinds of things that will help us to feel this is why I'm on this planet. This is what it's all about.
Reconnect with yourself.
Reconnect with yourself and your
Mm.
loved ones and the things that really
Mm.
matter. Now, you said you had a second point.
Yes. So, something that I've heard, I'm sure other people have heard it now, that we need to remember something, especially when we're using social media, things like that. If you are not paying, you are the product.
If you are not paying, you are the product.
Yes.
Exactly.
And that is
Exactly.
important to remember. They are not looking out for your best interest. They're looking
No,
out for their own best interest. The only person who can look after your best interest is yourself.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a hard lesson to learn, though. It's not easy to dissociate yourself from social media, where a lot of people, and I know people firsthand, who are on social media 24/7. I mean, if
Mm.
they're not asleep, they've got their Facebook open, or if they've got their Twitter open or Instagram open. And like I said, I've got all of them, and yes, I do interact on there, but I've had to learn to pull back really heavily. You have to step back away from it. It is not real life, and
No,
that's
it is.
something that I think a lot of people have trouble grasping, that it's not real life.
It's not real life. And I mean, with things like Second Life, things like where people are actually living virtual lives.
Yeah,
I had a friend
yeah,
who was a really early adopter of Second Life and was
I was
spending
too. I
hours and
loved it.
hours and hours there.
Yeah.
And yet it's like we are, and I think I feel very lucky in that I was born in the I was born in the analog stage. I was born
Mhm.
before digital came into existence. I grew up, I spent the first, I mean, I was listening to vinyl when I was a child.
Yeah.
And I was
Who
alive
doesn't love a
when
good
cassette,
vinyl?
yeah, who doesn't love a good vinyl?
Cassette
And then
tape,
I
yeah.
remember 8-track tapes and cassette tapes, and then when we came
Yeah.
to CDs. But
CDs, yeah.
I was alive in the time where everything was still analog, and then sort of saw the transition to digital and saw the transition to, like, even the whole thing of, like, where now we can stream any program we want anytime we
Mm.
want to watch it, versus when you had to actually watch a program at a specific time because that's when it was
Yeah.
airing.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting because when social media first started to come into existence, I was working as a tattooer. And so, like, well, actually, social media, yes, I was working as a tattooer. The internet, I was not yet a tattooer, but
Uh-huh.
I basically sort of back in like 1997 is when I first started down that amazingly bizarro rabbit hole of being tattooing people and putting prayers on people's skin. But when I first started doing the work, I had gloves on 6 to 9 hours out of the day where I was not able to touch a phone, where I was too
Mm,
busy to do other things. So I got very used to the habit of only checking social media when I wasn't doing other work. And I
yes.
remember two things that really struck me as I started to notice it getting more and more pervasive in our culture. One was when my nephew, who's now in his, like, good Lord, I think he's his 20 at this point in time, but he was probably 8 or 9. And I remember being in their house, and there was like a program that came on television. And I remember I was trying to have a conversation with him, and suddenly the TV is on, and he became like a zombie. Like he just
Ah,
went completely from having any kind of conversation with me to being completely like entranced by the television. Like he
wow.
went into a trance state, and
Yeah,
no matter how much I said his name and I was like, "Hey, hey, I'm talking to you," there was like I could do this with my hand,
yeah.
rubbing it across, running it across his, like, in front of his face, and he just was like not even noticing me
Wow.
because he was so like sucked into that. And that's
Mm,
something that I've heard a lot about with these kids, especially who are like being handed smartphones at very, very early ages, and children who
mm.
are being babysat by like
Buy an
Netflix
iPad.
and everything,
Yeah, yeah.
that they never, like, they are like getting their brains are developing in relation to the electronics.
Mm,
And whereas I was really lucky in that my brain did not develop with electronics, I was reading books, I was watching, I was my parents limited my television exposure, I was only allowed maybe 1 hour a night. I
mm.
had such a different experience. But
Yeah.
I will say the other thing that I noticed was friends where we'd be out at lunch or we'd be out at a restaurant or something, and maybe around, I don't know, like 15 years ago, all of a sudden I started noticing like people would be like in the middle of a conversation at restaurants and stuff like
And then
that
with
with
their
you,
phone.
and suddenly they'd pick up their phone and they'd start scrolling their social while you're having a
Yeah.
conversation. And I
Uh-huh.
mean, it's so I think we've really
It's
lost
such a
our
pet
social
peeve for
media.
me, Jennifer.
Yeah,
I really, really hate that, and sorry, go on.
yeah, yeah.
It gives me the
You and I could.
heebie-jeebies, you know?
It is so weird. It is so
Yeah.
unfortunate, and it drives my husband nuts because I will put my phone down and like be like, okay, my phone is over there. I'm not paying attention to it. I put my phone on airport mode and do not disturb a lot of the
Yeah,
time.
me too.
And he'll be like, "Hey, did you get my text message? I sent you a text message." I'm like, "No." And he's like,
No.
"Why aren't you looking at it?" I'm like, "Because I was busy. I was doing something. I'm not like
Yeah.
constantly checking my phone."
Oh, what
And
is that about? Why do they need to have an answer right now? Like, my
right
partner
now,
is
because we've
exactly the
gotten
same.
so accustomed to instant gratification.
Instant gratification. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and I could go, there's a whole other phenomenon that's really interesting in terms of the way people are running businesses and their
Mm.
lack of boundaries around running businesses, where it's like there are
Ugh.
people who will answer an email as soon as it comes in or whenever it comes in. And then you've
Yeah.
got these people who are irritated and annoyed. They're like, "Hey, I sent you the thing. Didn't you respond to me?" And I'm kind of like, I mean, that's what automation is for, but I'm also
Yes,
kind of like, this is my weekend. No, I'm not
that's
responding
right.
to you right now.
Yeah, yeah, boundaries, that's
Boundaries.
a huge I mean, we've been talking
Huge.
now for 34 minutes, and I wanted to ask you something, which I will go back to, but
Yes,
boundaries is huge, and I find that
huge.
younger people in particular don't know about boundaries, which is very foreign to me because growing up, my sister and I, as I said, we grew up in the 80s. So we had boundaries. We knew
Mhm.
exactly where we could tread. And even though we tested the limits, we knew exactly where we could go before would get our butts whipped.
Yes.
So we were not abused as children, but there's
But
nothing
you
wrong with
had,
me.
yeah, I mean, I grew up with a family where there were firm terms and firm
That's right.
expectations and a firm sense of what was appropriate and what wasn't, and there would be
Yeah,
consequences if you violated those
consequences, that's
terms.
right. There's no
And I mean,
consequences anymore.
no, well, and I actually have another theory about the lack of boundaries. One of the theories this just flew into my brain, so maybe it's like it's a half-baked theory, but the theory that I actually have is that the other piece of this is that with the onset of virtual life and social media, there is an artificial boundary or an arbitrary boundary that is already established for a lot of these kids in the sense, and especially when we went into lockdown and all of the teaching became virtual,
Mm,
there is a way that the physical body, like children are not in each other's physical proximity the same way that we were. So there
yeah.
isn't, in the same way that you can have sort of like somebody can be a real douche on the internet and sort of do a drive-by posting where they say something really cruel because there's no consequences, like they don't see the face
Mm,
of the person, they don't experience the consequences of it, they're just being mean, but they don't really, there's not a lot of ramification.
that's
I
right.
think that one of the reasons why the boundaries with kids are has gotten so amorphous is because there isn't the same kind of live real time reflection back of the consequences of being cruel and being mean, and especially with social media and
Mm,
the ways that kids can bully each other using social media. It's like the boundary is the artificial boundary of the separation between the two people, which I think
yeah.
allows people, emboldens people to be substantially more cruel.
Yes, and also, again, like you said, there's no there's no immediate consequences
No immediate
to
consequences.
being the douchebag online or bullying, and I have a real problem with bullying. Like, I have a huge issue with that. It
Yeah,
boils my
you and
blood.
me both.
Yeah,
And I actually believe that one of the things that is going on in our culture, in our on our planet right now, is that we have a rash of bullies all over the planet. All of
yeah,
these cisgendered heterosexual white men who are just stepping into this, who are just assuming these incredibly bombastic roles as bullies. And what I think is happening is that we have so many generations of ancestral trauma, so much history of tyranny and of bullies and of abusive parents, like alcoholic parents, that I
mhm,
think that there is a way that we are, as a culture, responding from the victim standpoint or from the child's standpoint, the person who has been bullied or the person who has been abused by their abusive parent. And what we're doing is we're triggered, and then we don't stand up to the bullies. And the
yeah.
bullies are getting emboldened to do
Oh,
these
yeah,
incredibly bad things right now. I mean, the
yeah.
lack of consequences in America in the last, like, I mean, pretty much since like that whole thing back before the presidential election, I mean, it's absolutely amazing that a man could say, I grabbed her by the pussy, and that didn't completely eliminate
I
his
don't get
even
that.
prospects for presidential. Like, and to think
Yeah,
that the born agains, the evangelicals, were the ones who were backing this man. I mean, the
yeah.
hypocrisy, don't even get me started.
But then, I also think, are they really hypocrites, or is there more to it we don't see? Maybe they're not showing us their true faces. They're hiding
Hmm.
behind these masks, and actually maybe we don't see everything. I mean, look, I'm not an American citizen. I love the US. I lived there for a long time. If I could, I would drop my Australian citizenship and I would be there. I actually intend to take the California bar and the New York bar after I graduate and I'm admitted to practice. So because I want to have something to do with the shaping of such an amazing country. I'm going to cry. The
It's an
country has
amazing
so
country.
much potential, and
Yeah.
yet, for some reason, it is the bullies that take the oxygen out of the room and no one else can have a say. It is this idiot that, for whatever reason, people think that he is amazing. Why is that? Why? I mean, this was not the intention for the show. I didn't want to talk about this with you, but
Yeah.
um
Sort of
it
funny
just
we've ended
happens,
up
I
in this
guess.
area.
But
Yes, but
yeah,
that's what utterly
yeah,
unscripted does.
that's it.
Yes.
That's what we
Yeah.
do. But I just don't understand how someone could say, "Oh yeah, he's the voice of the masses." He's not the voice of the masses. The
No.
voice of the masses is that he is an idiot.
Right.
I was gonna
Right.
swear really bad then, but
Yes, but you managed to restrain it, and we understand
yeah,
exactly what you were saying.
not that
You
it
know, I
matters. We
think
we can say those other words, but, I don't even want to allow that. I feel way too much about it because right now, as of this moment, I was just talking to somebody the other day. I have never wanted to go somewhere less than I feel right now about going to the US. I used to pine for going to the US. It used to be a couple of months back home in Australia, and for a period of about 11 years, I traveled for months at a time to the US. I would stay for as long as I could possibly stay without getting kicked out.
what was your favorite place to go?
Well, actually, I spent some time in Delaware. So New
Mm.
England is really it speaks to me. There's a
Mhm.
pull to that
Yeah.
area. New York, I spent it's funny actually. I spent 16 days staying at the Holiday Inn on West 41st Street in Times, like just off Times
In
Square.
Times Square? Oh my
Yeah.
god, yeah.
It just about bankrupted me, but it was amazing. I
It's
did that when I was
amazing.
18. Yeah.
Yeah, I pine I sometimes pine for Manhattan, and it's
Yeah.
been yeah, I mean, Manhattan is still just such a spectacular place.
Yes. There's some
It
energy
is so
there. I don't know if it's
wonderful.
my Dutch roots or because it was there's a lot of places now that they have Dutch names. I don't know if what it
Mhm,
is exactly, but I obviously have a connection there because every time I go there, I feel like I'm home. I never
mhm.
actually lived in New York. The place where I spent the most time was down actually in Southwest Louisiana in a small
Wow.
town, yeah, called Sulphur. It was about 11 miles from the Texas border.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Wow.
the deep south,
Deep
and
South, yeah.
I'm so sad that 99% of my relationships from Lake Charles, Sulphur, Louisiana, if they haven't moved away to other places that I've continued to remain in touch with them, but 99% of the relationships that I've had there have all fallen apart because they worship this orange idiot.
Mm, mm, mm.
I don't get it. I just don't understand it.
So,
I've never understood.
here's my so there's I think there's a couple different things that go into this. One is that this is a man who is actually trained in NLP, neuro
Mm,
linguistic programming. This is a man who was and now I mean I think his mind is getting a little wonky, but this is
yeah.
a man who has the technology of brainwashing and has the technology of hypnotic induction, hypnotic
Mm,
suggestion, and knows how to speak in a way that grabs people and engages them and puts them in a trance.
yeah, yeah,
NLP knows how to basically sort of hypnotize people to do your will. And
yeah,
it can be used as a tool for great good, but it can also be used as a tool to
yeah.
manipulate people. So I
Mm,
think that there's a certain bit of technology that is being used that is really engaging with and recognizing what is the emotional hot button that is getting people excited and getting people going, but
yeah.
then sort of appealing to that part. And
Mm,
the other thing is that I also really believe that as a culture, that there are sort of two ways that we tend to fall with perpetrators, that we either respond to the perpetrator as like, you are a perpetrator, I don't want to have anything to do with you, or if we have a lot of unreconciled trauma, we have a lot of unreconciled issues that have not ever been addressed and healed. What I actually think also will happen is that people trauma bond with the abuser and
yeah.
basically get fall into the gaslighting. And
Oh,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
I mean, it's fascinating in terms of I believe there are people who are voting for their own financial best interests. But then something that I heard somebody say a really long time ago was it was an interview with Amy Goodman on Democracy Now, and she was
Hmm.
talking about, I can't remember who it was, but they were talking about the concept of aspirational voting, and the
Okay.
idea of, in America, there's this whole phenomenon of people who vote for what they fantasize they will become, and that there are a number of people, and that the Republicans, like the Democrats, God bless the Democrats, I don't think that we have a very good marketing plan. Whereas the
No,
Republicans have a fantastic marketing plan.
they know
And
how
what
to
they
do it,
were
don't
able
they?
to do was sell the idea of, you will be a wealthy person someday. Therefore, it is in your best interest to back us now.
Yeah.
And it's, and I mean, from my understanding, there's also a direct correlation in terms of looking at the just sort of looking at who voted what where. Education is like, there is a direct correlation
Oh yeah.
between higher education and whether you're talking red or blue. And that
Yeah. Yeah.
while there are educated people who are voting red, that the interestingly, if you looked at the voting maps overall, the red areas were areas where there was lower incomes, lower education, lower
Yeah.
resources. And, this kind of leads me back to just thinking about what I really believe is that we have hit critical mass in
Mm.
terms of our chickens coming home to roost as a species. And we are at a point now where some of us are willing to do the personal work and deal with our trauma and do the things to start addressing not only our own legacies of trauma, but the belief systems and the attitudes and the views that come from generation upon generation. But then there's also a number of people who either are not resourced enough, don't have the just never learned how, don't have the means to do it, or or just have been socialized and taught to suppress, like push down the feeling, push
Mhm.
down the
Mhm.
feeling, push down the feeling. And I
Yeah.
think that, this sort of goes back to just the beginning of this whole conversation about why is everybody just waking up and feeling so intense? And
Mm.
I actually think that a big part of it is that we are hitting critical mass in terms of all of the trauma that we've been kicking down the road. Like, we've been kicking these cans down the road for a really, really, really long time.
Yeah.
And now it's like we can't kick the can any further, and it's all coming up in our face.
We're running out of road.
We're
Yeah.
running out of road, but we are also coming to a point where I believe that we are coming to a point of reckoning where we get to do something completely differently. And
Mm.
that the
Mhm.
possibility of what we can do next is actually, to me, is very, very exciting.
It is. Well,
Yeah.
and I completely agree with you. Let me go back to
Yes, go
we've
back.
because we've been talking we had a little bit of a segue, but um I want to talk about your skills.
Yes.
And I had a question that I feel as though if someone is listening to this, maybe they need a little bit of an explanation. Um, I myself have my idea of what an empath is, but maybe someone is listening, they've been maybe feeling overwhelmed by their emotions. They've been, you know, distancing themselves from people because they can't deal with whatever it is that they're picking up while they're around people. What is an empath, and
Okay.
how can somebody recognize that?
Okay, so basically an empath, so there's a spectrum. And on
Mhm.
one side of the spectrum, we have somebody like his orangeness, who is like a sociopath and gives like two F's about anybody else, like, or zero
Yeah.
F's about anybody else. And we have the people who are, we have the people who have the capacity to identify or see another person's experience, have compassion for them, but maintain a distance, maintain separation.
Mm.
Like they can recognize what's theirs, what's not theirs, and they're not feeling another person's agony. Then
Right.
we get people who start to be in what I would call empathic, or in the capacity. We have people actually who have the capacity to empathize, where they
Mhm.
can imagine themselves in that person's position. They can put themselves in that person's shoes. They can have empathy for the experience that somebody is having, but they can
Mhm.
still recognize the separation between themselves and another.
Mhm.
Then we start to get into what I would call the people who are empathic, in the sense that they are very sensitive to other people's needs. They feel other people's needs. They can sense it. They can anticipate things beforehand. But
Mhm.
often they'll still have a capacity to recognize that they're empathizing with somebody as opposed to that they're feeling it. An
Yeah.
empath is the person who's at the absolute other side of that extreme, his orangeness on one side, empath on the other. And an empath is a person who picks up the thoughts, the feelings, the energy, the sensations, the intensity of the world
Mm.
around them. But instead of being able to identify it or recognize it as I'm absorbing this coming from the world, empaths feel it as if it's their own. And
Yeah.
so the thing that makes being so, and this is where like the line between intuitive, psychic, and empath gets really interesting, because a psychic or an intuitive is also picking up a great deal of information from the world around them. But the thing about them is that they still can recognize the difference between themselves and the other. An
Yeah.
empath, when their filters are not established, when they are in a situation where they're in a state of deep distress, the problem with being an empath, or the challenge with being an empath, especially before we learn to work with it, is that we experience the information that is coming from the outside world through our own personal filter, and we interpret it as if it's our own. So, one of the
Uh-huh.
things that happens for empaths so frequently is you wake up feeling out of sorts. You wake up feeling weird. You might have had a week where you're just like, what is going on? Nothing
Mm.
correlates in your life that fits it, but you feel blue, you feel anxious, you feel scared, you feel distressed. And so, a lot of times, what empaths will start to do is they'll start trying to figure out what in their life is causing it, when the truth is they are picking up on something outside of themselves that they're absorbing. Now, to make it even more complicated, though, most often, the reason why we're so vulnerable to these things is because we do carry something inside of us, a memory, a trauma, an experience that the experience reflects. And so,
Mm.
part of why, as empaths, we get so jangled by things that are going on in the world around us is because there is something, there may be a trauma or a trigger within us that is getting rocked by the
Uh-huh.
event that is happening. But
Right.
to be, so in one of the things I really noticed too is that for many people, there's a period before you recognize that you're an empath where you're just walking around like an open wound, taking on the feelings from the world. Like you could go out into the public and then come home and be like, why do I feel so completely out of sorts? Why do
Yeah.
I feel so strange? And so a lot of people will then start doing these things of like not wanting to go out into the public, not wanting to, like just sort of guarding themselves.
Mm.
And so what I and when I was first working with when I first started realizing and started cultivating, excuse me, or developing the empathic mastery system, it was because I was talking to so many clients who were struggling with anxiety, who were struggling with just with despair, were struggling with all kinds of like, just really finding it hard to live.
Yeah.
And again, I was noticing that they were highly sensitive. They were highly sensitive, and what was happening was that they were picking up other people's stuff and they were filtering it as if it was their own.
Mhm.
And I'll just add, going back to sort of the piece we were talking about people not feeling their feelings and like the critical mass we're at, the thing is that many empaths will have grown up in a family system where they were told that they were being too sensitive, that they were overreacting, that they were taking it too personally, that they were, they just making too big a deal out of it. Stop worrying about it. Just let it go. All this stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Because frequently we grew up in families where there was histories of trauma. There was, I mean, pretty much any human being is going to have a history of trauma, in my personal opinion.
Mhm.
But that there would be things where we had been, as and especially as white people, white settlers, we were taught to compartmentalize, we were taught to suppress, we were taught to deny, we were taught to ignore. And so you have these little, highly sensitive, magical children born into these families where there's all of this unspoken emotion going on and all of this stuff that's not being addressed. And the child is basically the lightning rod or the canary in the coal mine who is feeling all of that stuff. And
Mhm.
so that's the thing I've noticed for a lot of empaths too, is that we are especially vulnerable or susceptible to absorbing stuff when we're in a world where there are people who are not willing to feel their own feelings. And going back to what you and I were talking about earlier about the whole thing of uh sorry, brain just decided to stop working there for a second. Okay, like go hit the Wayback Machine. So we're people not being, sort of people projecting their fears outside
Uh-huh.
of themselves. That when people are projecting their fears outside of themselves, empaths feel the fear. But not only do we feel the fear, we go down the awfulizing rabbit hole and we see all of the horrible things that these people are fearing and projecting, but we see
Yeah.
it through the filter of them sort of like declaring it as the future that will come to pass. So
Yes.
it's just a total double whammy for empaths. So how was that for an explanation of what is an empath?
Good. That was good. Because I had other questions that you addressed straight away in there because I wanted to talk. I've had other people that have come to me and go, "Oh, I'm an empath." Okay. And that's I don't want to be dismissive of people, but a lot of the time I think that they're just, I don't actually think in particular that this person is an empath. But it, I
There's an
I think it's
interesting
a
difference
yeah.
between narcissists
Yeah.
who identify as empaths. There's definitely, and there's a really interesting dance between narcissists and empaths, and the fatal attraction of narcissists and empaths. But I
Yes.
have to say that sometimes as empaths, we don't necessarily recognize our own part in certain things. But yes, I
Yeah,
know.
rather than saying, I am. No, I really am,"
Yeah.
and I felt like for this person who used to call phooey on things of, say, a metaphysical nature, who
Mhm.
at one time was extremely religious, um, y you know, it's a real contrast now for them to be saying, "Oh, I'm an empath and I can do this and my empathic skills have allowed me to recall things from and there's stories and I don't want to just in case they're listening and then they call me and they're gonna get shitty with me. I don't want to do that because I don't need the drama. But I find myself calling Fui where I'm quite open to all of these things, always have been since a very young age. I come from a long line of people who have had certain abilities, and I've heard stories throughout the history of my family. So it is something that has been passed down, I believe. I am intuitive.
Mhm.
I have put up a lot of blocks and barriers over the last few years because I was protecting myself.
Yes.
I feel though someone who is saying these things who used to say fooey, are they just saying it because they want attention? Is this just another I don't know. Do they need attention? I feel, it's hard.
Well,
But
and one of the
they've
things,
never
like,
questioned it. Do you know what I mean, Jennifer?
yeah,
They've
no,
never
I hear
questioned
you.
that they could be.
Well, and sometimes it's just like there are certain people. There's actually, one of the things I've noticed is that there's a dance with certain people where it's like they claim their fear as psychic ability when really what they're
Yeah.
doing is they're awfulizing and projecting.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I just know this is going to happen. And it's sort of like,
Mhm.
honey, you don't know this is going to happen. You're just a hot mess and you're projecting this
Yeah.
all over the place. But, the thing is that I am a very strong believer that in the idea of or the concept of what a responsible empath is, what a recovering
Mhm.
empath is. And one of the things that I believe very strongly in about a person, when you understand that you are an empath, you have responsibilities to quote Will Wheaton, don't be a dick. And
Mhm.
and that one of the things that I believe and I've said in my book is just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Agreed. Yeah.
And the thing is that also includes psychic reading, intuitive probing, and
Yeah.
like checking out or sussing out what's going on with somebody. I
Yeah.
have a
Yeah.
foundational law that I live by, which is without permission, I am not allowed to interfere. Unless I have consent, I do not go looking under the hood. Now, when I
Mhm.
was younger and I basically would happen into situations and be feeling other people's stuff and picking up on thoughts and feelings and getting telepathic downloads and stuff,
Yeah.
I didn't have control over that.
Mm.
But now that I know what I am and I do have some choices about it, anytime I start to notice that I'm starting to pick up more information about somebody, I then back the truck up,
Yeah.
and and basically refuse to, like, I will not engage with that. And so
Mm.
when you have somebody who's saying something like, "Oh, well, I'm an empath and I can do this, this, and this," it's like, okay, so you can do this, this, and this, but should you be doing this, this, and this?
Should you
Are
be?
you
Yeah, I
behaving
agree.
responsibly? Are
Yeah.
you getting consent? Because I believe that
Yeah.
every single one of us has our own free agent, and it is our responsibility to contain our personal space and to not probe other people's personal space. The only
Yeah.
caveat or, sort of exception I have to that is if you are the parent or guardian for a minor or somebody who is developmentally, constitutionally incapable of advocating or being sovereign for themselves, then
Mhm.
we have the right to use a little bit more of like we can intercede, we can intervene, we can tune
Sure.
in. But
Yeah.
aside from that, any other human being with free will, we don't have permission. We need to just like mind our own business. And
Mind your
that's
business. Yeah.
mind your business. And that is a thing that I think some people as empaths don't do, is mind their own business. The other thing that's one of my personal pet peeves is the whole thing of empaths who use the identity of empath as a way to stay debilitated and to basically justify bad behavior and not taking personal responsibility for their own stuff
Yeah.
because because it's like, well, I can't help it, I just pick up I pick up all the energy in the world, I pick up everything, I'm just it's just too much for me. And
Because that's easier.
that's easier.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to just be like, okay, I need to back up from this precipice. I need to do everything I can to protect myself. I mean, at the beginning of like the pandemic here in the United States, it was a I know it was an absolute mess for you guys too, but it was an absolute mess. And in the very early stages, not only was an absolute mess, but my dad got COVID and died from it. So I
Oh, I'm
was
so sorry.
really, thank you. It was his time. He was a very old gentleman and he
Mhm.
was absolutely ready to go. And he had a very strong constitution, so it was kind of a blessing because his mind had already disappeared and his body was
Uh,
still ticking. But,
yeah.
and as somebody who does sort of connect with people on the other side, I will say he is absolutely right as rain at this point and,
Mhm.
is more than happy to like offer his 2 cents about everything. But the point of this is to say that at that time, not only was I picking up on the intensity of the world around us, but I was starting to get premonitions about my father's passing.
Mm.
And it was a period that was very stressful. I was waking up feeling like I was plugged into an electric socket at like 5 o'clock in the morning. I was having
Mm.
heart palpitations all the time. I was experiencing ringing in my ears constantly. And I got to
Yeah.
the point where I had to make a choice that I was just going to back off. And so I went through a phase where the only thing that I could watch, like the only thing I could stream on television was Good Witch. Like it was like,
Oh, I
which if
love
you,
it.
I love Good
Oh,
Witch. I love
love
Good
it.
Witch. I'm so bummed that Hallmark decided to like end it after the
Yeah.
seventh season because it was so dear. But like I could watch Good Witch. Like I could watch, like I could do these things that were just really gentle, really tender, really sweet.
Yes.
But
It's
I
so
had,
wholesome too, that
and
show,
so
you know,
wholesome.
it's yeah. Mm.
And I had to, and I just made the very deliberate choice that I was going to really, really protect myself, like cloister myself and nurture myself. And that's the thing as an empath, is that it is our responsibility to do the things we can do to protect our sensitivity. Another
Yeah.
thing that I'm very passionate about is actually sugar consumption and avoiding sugar. that
Mhm.
that sugar tends to, and talk about, you were talking about the bullies taking all the oxygen out of the room. Interestingly, there's a real correlation between yeast overgrowth in our gut and gut dysbiosis and sort of systemic yeast in our system, consumption of sugar, but also how that blocks out all the favorable flora and fauna in our system, or flora in our system, so that
Mhm.
our gut
I hope there's no fauna.
we get gut we get yeah, hopefully not the fauna, but we get this gut dysbiosis that then affects us mentally as well as emotionally and physically.
Yeah.
And I actually think that I actually have a theory that one of the reasons why there are so many bullies in America, on the planet right now, is actually because our diet got so shifted when the food pyramids shifted in the 1970s. Not only do we
Mhm.
have, this onset or epidemic of type 2 diabetes, we have this epidemic of morbid obesity, but we also have
Yeah.
ubiquitous consumption of sugar, which feeds the
Sugar.
yeast in
Mm.
our gut. And the yeast is this population that is crowding out all the good stuff. So, like, as you were talking about the bullies choking up or taking all the oxygen in the room, I also really think about weeds in a garden taking up
Mm.
all the space and just how
Yeah.
lethal that is. So,
Oh,
one of
yeah.
the things we can do as highly sensitive empathic people, if we're feeling blue, if we're feeling sensitive, if we're feeling like, just like, why am I picking this up? Look at your sugar consumption. Look at your
Mhm.
carbohydrate consumption. If you are
Which
consuming a
turns
lot of
into
sugar,
sugar for those who
which
don't
turns
know.
into
Yeah.
sugar,
Yeah.
and it
That's right.
also, insulin is a hormone. Insulin is a
Yes.
hormone. Sugar deeply affects our hormonal regulation. And as you know,
Mm.
not only, and the thing is that hormones are all interrelated. So you start messing with your body's need or your body's relationship to insulin, it's also going to start messing with your cortisol, with your adrenal, your adrenaline, with your
Mm.
estrogen, with your progesterone, with your testosterone, with all of these different hormones. They start getting mixed up. And
Yeah.
anybody who's ever had a hormonal moment knows that when your hormones are out of whack, your capacity to navigate the world and think clearly gets deeply affected too.
I
So,
completely agree with that. Yeah, I
yeah.
heard recently. So during the pandemic, when we were in such heavy lockdowns here in Australia, and also because my mother is a cancer survivor, so because of that, we decided to go into an even deeper lockdown. We just decided we would close off to the world. We could all work from home. We stayed home. We did, the kids even stayed home from school. We did 9 months of that, but during that time I was I was really heavily into the sugar. I was bored shitless. I
Hmm.
just I had nothing else to do, and then I lost my job and I couldn't work, and it was terrible, and I ballooned. I blew
Hmm.
up basically. Um I For people who don't know, I was drinking maybe 4 bottles of Coke a day
Bottles as in
As in like
liters?
a 600 ml bottle, which is like they used to be called the Coke Buddies. So back a long time ago, you know, when you go to the Walmart and they have the fridges by the checkout, and you could just grab a bottle out of there, just some, you know, one of those. So I would have, um, I think it equates to 1.25 liters of Coke. It's such a lot of
1.25
Coke.
liters. So you're talking, so to converting to our non-metric system, you're
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about like,
Should
you're
I ask my
basically talking
watch?
about 8 cups. One bottle is not 8 cups. One bottle is 5 cups,
5 cups of sugar.
5 cups of Coke. And you were doing, and so you were having 20 cups of Coke a day
Minimum,
minimum.
minimum, and
I'm
that was
glad you're
costing me
here.
money.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no
me too.
kidding.
I hit just under 300 pounds, and I said, "Oh my god." I knew something was wrong. My hormones were all over the place, and I
Yep.
started doing some research, and the very first thing that struck a note with me was that ref processed sugar is 10 times harder to come off than heroin.
Yes. Yes.
And I thought, I don't want to be that person.
No.
I don't want to be. And from that day, that when I saw that, from that day, cold turkey, I did not touch another Coke. And I dropped about 10 pounds really quickly.
Yeah.
10 pounds came off really, really quickly. And I thought, holy shit. And I noticed that my inflammation had gone down because I was having
Mhm.
swollen ankles. My
Mhm.
blood pressure has come down. My
Mhm.
cholesterol has come down. There are still changes that I'm trying to make. I've moved to becoming a vegan again. I used to be a vegan. Now I'm going back to that, although at the moment I'm a little bit pescatarian. I
Mhm.
still have a little bit of fish, and it's very difficult to make such a huge change very quickly because I'm also not the only person that I need to think about in my household.
Right. Right.
So, yeah, but I have noticed huge changes, huge changes. The only other thing that I've noticed is since I have stopped drinking Coke, and I don't know whether this is related at all, but I am very sensitive to electronics.
Mhm. Mhm.
There is a constant hum and a buzz or a ringing. It feels like tinnitus, actually.
Okay, so my understanding about this ringing in the ears is that this is something that is happening for many of us who are sensitive. This is
Oh,
something that is fairly pervasive, and that there is a lot of people reporting the ringing in their ears. And
mm,
one of the things that people say is that it is, quote, an ascension symptom, that it is actually as we are shifting in consciousness and we are awakening to more and more sensitivity and awareness of, like, I have a mentor, amazing woman. Her name's Joanna Hunter. And Joanna talks about the fact that the human eye is only capable of seeing like 10% of like the spectrum of things. We're only
uh-huh, yeah,
capable of hearing a very limited spectrum of frequencies.
mm,
And the thing is that as human beings, what I think is happening is we are actually increasing our capacity to perceive things that we have not been perceiving before. And
mm,
it's coming in as this ringing. So I'm not sure if what you're talking about is an increased sensitivity to EMFs and electronics,
could be.
or if you are yet another one of us who is experiencing, what some people call the ascension symptoms, but where we
Mm,
are just experiencing that constant thing. The other thing I wonder about is, with us all making the transition to a primarily virtual life, what is the impact of living with
oh, yeah,
earphones and
earphones,
earbuds
yeah.
in our ears like
I
all
was
the
deaf in
time?
my ear the other day. My left ear, I woke up and I couldn't hear anything out of my left ear. Now, people who don't know, I wear the headphone on my left ear and I take it slightly off my right ear so that I get a little bit of a balance there. Um, and I had 4 interviews that I had to do that day, and it was ugh, It was
Mm.
a nightmare.
Yeah,
But
that sounds
I
like a
have
nightmare.
always been someone who is sensitive to the electronic
Yeah.
thing. I
Yeah.
always have been. I've always been very sensitive. I've always seen things that other people don't see. I've heard things that other people don't hear. I don't talk about it very much, but I am opening up to that more now, and especially through utterly unscripted. I'm exposing myself to more people who will help me understand, and I hope that through my learning and understanding, other people are learning and understanding. But I mean, to the point where, you know, your cell phone rings. Oh, it sends like it's like nails on a chalkboard. It is terrible. I cannot handle the sound.
I don't I mean I spend a lot of time with my phone on airport mode or on the very least
Yeah.
on do not disturb
It's
because
yeah.
I just, and I really, I'm really grateful that I am not nearly as sensitive to EMFs and to Wi-Fi and frequencies as some people are. Like I'm in the
Mm,
room with our Wi-Fi router and I can be in this room without it causing me harm, but I
yeah.
know people who are so sensitive to the electronics, so sensitive to Wi-Fi, so sensitive to that it causes chronic pain, that it
Yeah.
causes mental distress, that it just
Yeah.
creates so many different things.
I went to
So,
school with a girl who had that actually.
yeah,
She developed it later on, because being in the 80s, we didn't have all of that. But I was talking to her recently, and she said about that, and I said, "Really?" She took my questioning of how she was experiencing things as being judgmental, which I was absolutely not trying to do. But she even said that at sometimes she can't walk outside because the buzzing from the electrical lines overhead are giving her migraines, and she's completely incapacitated by it. And people
yes,
phooey that. That's something, but I find that that's a lack of understanding.
it is a
If you're
lack
gonna
of
foo
understanding.
that, it's you don't get it.
Well, and one of the things that I've been saying for years, one of my personal mottos for empaths is don't judge your rainbow by colorblind standards. We have the
Uh-huh.
capacity to see a broader spectrum, but we're
Yeah.
living in a dominant culture that is sort of living in like basically like red, blue, green. Like
Mhm.
we're living in, or CMYK, like we're living in a culture that is extremely limited in its perspective. And
Mm.
instead of saying, wow, you can see things that I can't see, people were sort of, the dominant culture has enough hubris to basically say there's no such thing as that color, that doesn't exist. And it's like,
Yes.
well,
Yeah.
yes, actually it does. You're just deficient, you can't see
Yeah.
this. But I mean, it's interesting. I've absolutely had the experience of like walking under high tension wires and feeling that kind of like that, ugh, it just makes your skin crawl.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I working
Germany is
or
really
like
bad for
being
that,
near
actually.
cell phone towers, like all kinds of
Yes.
stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm, like I said, I'm incredibly grateful that my tolerance for electronics and for Wi-Fi and for cell phone signals is not what it is for some people. But
Mm.
I had a friend who was living in a house with bad wiring and it nearly killed her. Like it was just,
Wow.
she was in so much physical agony and mental, like she was losing her mind. She moved
Mm.
out of the place and
Yeah.
things sort of set back, like things got better. So,
Yeah.
it's thinking about, you know, one of the things I was talking about, or we were talking about, is sort of like the difference between people who are just complaining about stuff versus talking about solutions. And I just wanted to
Mm.
say, we've been talking about a few solutions through this conversation. One of them being curate your social media, curate your exposure to
Right.
things, curate what you're watching on television, curate your thoughts, curate the way you express things, curate how you communicate about your own emotions. Then the next
Mm.
one was, look at what your sugar consumption is. Look at your diet. Look at this. I'll just say as a caveat, I am not a vegan at this point in my life because I am very sensitive to carbohydrates. I have insulin resistance and I'm like right on the border of becoming, if I were to eat a vegan diet, I would become a type 2 diabetic
Wow.
because I
Mm.
cannot tolerate grains at all. I cannot tolerate
Ah.
legumes. That any kind of carbs like that really set my body off. And so, what I think is incredibly important is dialing in the diet that works right for your body and
Oh,
not
absolutely.
necessarily following
Yeah.
like the dogma,
Don't follow the
because
fads. Yeah.
don't follow. And also, there's a lot, like there's a really amazing interview that I did with a woman on my podcast, which is called the Empathic Mastery Show, with this woman, Shannon Plummer, who's a nutritionist. And she and I did a 2-part interview. One part was about sugar. The other part was about how can you be a meat eater as an empath? Because there are a lot of people who are empaths and vegans who think that you can't possibly eat meat and be an empath. And I'm like, yeah, you
Yeah.
can. And for some of us, it's
Yeah.
really a matter of life, like we don't
That's
have the
right.
alternative. But so there's, the solution of sugar. Oh, and of being very mindful of our diet. But then the third thing I was going to say is, if for somebody who's really highly sensitive, like unplugging the Wi-Fi at night, taking your phone and putting it on airport mode before you go to bed. Like, don't
Mhm.
leave your phone unless you have children that you need to have your phone on in case something is going on. There is no adult in the world, unless there's an emergency, like you've got a family in the hospital, they just had surgery. There is no reason why you should be available at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Turn your phone off, put it on airport mode, or like power it down entirely and let your phone rest. Because in my
Yeah.
experience, phone on airport mode is not the same as phone shut off. And
No,
that
it's
a
not.
phone shut off is actually a much quieter, you're not getting an energetic signal from your phone. But
Yeah.
like, turn off the what, turn off your, unplug your router as before you go to bed. Turn off your phone before you go to
Mm.
bed. Like, if you have a lot of like power strips and you have a lot of smart devices like televisions and other things that are sort of like always in that sort of on state,
Yeah.
unplug stuff and notice the difference in terms of the silence that you
Oh,
experience
yeah.
in your own home. Yeah.
Even if I think that that may take time for some people. They will have to detox. I understand that. It is a process. It's not always something that, yes, I gave up Coca-Cola cold turkey and I said, I'm not having it anymore. I cannot be this person anymore. I know that it's a process. I know that these things happen. But you know what? Even putting your phone away from you,
Yes.
if okay, you can't turn it off, fine, but just put it away from you. Put it on the bedside somewhere, not on your bedside cabinet. Put it on a dresser
Put it on
across
your
the other side of
dresser.
the room or
Right.
something. Yeah,
Which will also
don't have it
mean
next
that
to
you'll
you.
have to get up to turn off your alarm instead of just hitting the snooze
Yes, that's
button.
right.
Yeah.
No hitting the although unless you're like me and I've got the watch and
Ah,
it taps my arm. It's a nice quiet way to wake
mm-hmm.
up. I'm usually
Nice.
awake before the alarm, but it's not a blaring sound. I just don't know what has happened because I used to have alarms like that and it used to be fine, but now I've
Now it's
changed. I
just
guess I'm
different.
because I'm older, it's completely different.
It's
And
really
this
jarring.
watch, it is jarring, and
Yeah.
it's not a nice way to start your day. It doesn't set you up for a
Mm-mm.
good day at
Mm-mm.
all,
No,
and I
it sets
found
off our nervous system.
yes, it does, yeah,
Yeah.
and it's not fun. With the watch, there's no sound, and it's just a tap, 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 tap on my wrist, and it gradually gets a little bit harder if I'm not listening to it, but you know what? Sometimes just don't. I know that it's easy for some people to say, and, I work from home now, but who says you have to get up when the alarm goes off?
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to say, "Oh, I'm not doing it." You need to be kind to yourself,
We
and
need, yes.
work is work, and I know that people need to work sometimes in order to live and survive, but do you know what? If you drop dead tomorrow or whatever from working yourself too hard, you will be replaced by that company within a day.
Mm-hmm.
They will
Mm-hmm.
not come to your funeral. They will not grieve for you. You are expendable, and to them at least, but not to your family, not to yourself. You need to take care of yourself.
Well, and I think that one of the things that we really noticed or discovered with this pandemic was also how many of the things we assumed we needed and that we assumed we had to do
Yeah.
really have not been necessary. I mean, my husband and I, like you guys, we really went into lockdown. I have, as I was saying, I'm like this far, I mean, this close to type 2 diabetes, and I have
Mm.
autoimmune stuff. I'm a chronic Lyme survivor. And so I'm pushing 60. And so I am not a person who would fare well. And my lungs, I've had bouts of pneumonia a couple of times. I've had pneumonia a few times in my life. My
Wow.
lungs are one of my most vulnerable parts of my body. I knew that if I got COVID, I'd be screwed. And
Yeah.
I'd be screwed. And my husband is like less vulnerable than I am, but we were like, I don't want to get this. I don't want I have a friend who got it who lives in Texas. She got it before the vaccines came out. She is
Mm.
still she got it probably in, like, I don't know, autumn of 2020 or like early spring of 2021, but she got it at a time when, like, we didn't have vaccines. There was all you could do was avoid it. She is still
Yeah.
dealing with long hauler symptoms at this point in
Uh,
time, over a year, like well over a year later. She's dealing with long hauler symptoms. And I'm just like, yeah, no, not going to happen. And so we really also just really made a very, like, we really just like changed the way we were doing a number of things, especially grocery shopping and acquiring supplies. And,
oh
like,
yeah.
I mean, I haven't been to, other than going to a furniture store because we desperately need to replace our couches, but that's a whole other story. It hasn't happened yet. We have not, I like haven't gone really, like, I've barely gone shopping other than to grocery
Mm.
stores or pharmacies or a hardware store. And I've been very, very mindful of where do I go? What do I do? And so much of what I thought was like I needed, I don't need.
You didn't. Yeah.
I don't need. And I think that's the thing. It's like my life has gotten so much simpler and it is so much better because of that.
Absolutely. And I think that's important that people understand that things have changed now. I wanted to quickly just touch on, we were talking about how people are maybe not as open to accepting that there are things that we can't see. You were saying we can only see a very small portion of vibrations, lights, etc. I actually was thinking about it. If you don't believe that, all you have to do is a hearing test. There's a hearing test, and because younger people can hear different frequencies than slightly older people, and if you don't believe that there are things that that the vibrations, or even we were talking about the EMF, etc. If you don't believe that, all you need to do is make sure your laptop is plugged in. If it's a metallic one like mine, I have a MacBook.
I
Make
do
sure
too.
you're Yep, make sure it's plugged into the power. Take your shoes off and make sure that they're flat on the floor. Then touch your laptop and tell me that there's no energy coming off of your electrical items.
Right,
Because some
right.
people don't think about that.
Well, or, one of the reasons why you and I, before we even got on, we were talking about headphones, and I was talking about how I don't love my Audio Technicas. And one of the reasons I don't love my Audio Technicas is because when the cord sits on top of itself, it
Uh-huh.
basically causes this reverberation where suddenly I get these
Ah,
awful, awful electronic noises that are coming from it. And, it's like, I mean, that's not exactly the same thing in the sense of like sounds that we don't hear, but
mm,
it is, again, this thing of all these frequencies that we may not be paying attention to, and then all of we
yeah,
need to do is like suddenly discover, like, oh, here's the sound, or here's the thing.
yeah, yeah.
And visually, there are, if you've ever done like a color spectrum thing, there are some of us who have eyes that have more rods and cones. And as a visual, I have a very, very heightened sense of color, and I can see nuances of color. Interestingly, I had a business partner who was an artist, but who was colorblind. And so he and I were kind of on either side of the spectrum, where he couldn't
Mm,
see certain things and I could see like extra color. But what's
wow.
fascinating is, like, you can even look at or do a test for your like capacity to see gradation of color. And there
Mhm.
are some of us who have a capacity to see nuance of color that many people just cannot see. Like, they really
Mm,
do see like the rainbow, whereas some of us see like this hundreds of like just like the variation is just almost countless. And it's
Wow.
another example of how we think we think what we see, what we hear is all there is, when there's so
Mm.
much more.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's an important lesson. We've said it already. Be kind to yourself.
Be
Be
kind to
kind
yourself.
to other
Be
people.
kind
Just
to other
you don't
people.
know what other. Oh, your cat's tail is saying hi.
Yes, it is. This is Neo.
Hi, kitty.
Yeah, this is Neo. He's very, very sweet.
Oh, look. Oh, we love animals. If anybody actually, I keep saying, because I've got a TikTok account, and I've been trying to promote Utterly Unscripted on TikTok, but I'm not doing very well because all I do is keep sharing photos and videos of my animals. I have ferrets, so I share photos of them, and then we've got the dogs and the cat. And the other day I saw a small eagle, a hawk. We've got a family of them that have been nesting in the trees just here in my yard, and they're driving us completely batty with their screeching. But it's just cute to watch them. And so I saw the baby, and I took the phone out, and so took a video of that. That's on my TikTok. People can see that.
Oh, that is
Gonna
awesome.
Gonna be Jesse is the name on TikTok. And I've been telling people, because I'm not making a separate one for this podcast. I'm sorry. You will just have to put up with my animal spam in amongst all the utterly unscripted stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I have a nest of phoebes that is in the eaves in my workspace. And
Oh,
the interestingly, a cowbird left their egg in the first clutch, and so sadly, the cowbirds made it, but the other phoebes didn't. But the mama phoebe came back and laid a second clutch, and I
oh,
just looked
lovely.
yesterday, and there's all these babies, these tiny
Oh,
little babies
beautiful.
in the nest. It's awesome. So it's
Animals are
wonderful.
great. They make
Animals
us feel
are
so
great.
much more at peace. Yeah.
And I think they remind us of what really matters. We get so caught
Yeah.
up in the human idea and the human ego, and just
Mm,
all of the ways as human beings we think we are the ultimate. We think that we are
mm.
so important. We think that we know all the answers. We are so clueless. And
Yeah. Yeah.
we are like, and in terms of the grand scheme of time, we are a blip
Yeah.
in time, a blip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. How what is that? I heard that somewhere. I'm not gonna say it because I can't remember it, but,
Okay.
um, I want I can't remember it, and I've done that before where I thought of a joke and I tried it out and I missed the punchline completely, and I just looked like an idiot then, so I'm not gonna do that.
I
And it
feel
was
ya.
with a comedian, no less.
Yeah, I feel ya. Nothing like mutilating a punchline,
Yeah,
or like when you
and
can
the
only remember
yeah,
part of the joke and you love
I
it,
thought I
and
did
you
it
think
really
it's so
well.
funny. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I did wonderfully, and I'm laughing, and the comedian was like, "Not sure." They didn't laugh, and I was like, "Oh, shit, let's just move on." Very quickly, your book, Empathic Mastery
Empathic
book.
mastery. Yes. Five-step system to go from emotional hot mess to thriving success.
I love it.
Yeah,
And
and you
that's,
can get it
the
at
website is
empathicmasterybook.com. Yeah.
thank you. I didn't
Yeah.
have to switch the
Yeah.
tag, but you also have empathicsensitivity.com, and
Yes.
that is like a course for people.
That is a place where you can go and get an ebook that is going to give you some tools to get started and show you what to do. It
Great.
brings you into it. You'll get a course that will sort of you'll get a series of emails that are going to guide you through the process. So it's kind of a mini course that you get. And then you'll
Okay.
also be given the opportunity to come join my Facebook group, which is a curated Facebook group called the Empathic Mastery Circle, that is a free group where I teach master classes every single month. I do EFT tapping, which is one of my skills and
Ooh, I
tools that I
love that.
use
Yeah.
for releasing stuff. We have Tapping Tuesday every other Tuesday, and we've got Tarot Tuesday on the other Tuesdays. And
Great.
then all kinds of wonderful stuff happening in that group, because I am such a strong believer in together we rise, together we will change this world. And so,
Absolutely.
I welcome anybody who's listening to this and is like, hey, this chick sounds kind of interesting, I'd love to be part of her world, welcome to my world. Come on over to empathicsensitivity.com. You'll get an invitation to come on over into the Facebook group, and then you can start learning about all of the other things that I do. And depending on
Fantastic.
when this episode airs, the Empathic Mastery Academy, which is my paid for course, is going to be happening this in the autumn of 2020. The next time it goes live is going to be in the autumn of 2022, and that
Okay.
is really where I take you through the entire process of how to work with the 5 steps of empathic mastery. And just to say, the book is broken into 2 parts. The first part is all about what does it mean to be an empath? Why are we like this? What are the
Mm,
ramifications of this? Like all of the consequences of that. And then the second part is the 5 steps of empathic mastery. Recognize, which is all about what's mine, what's not mine. Release, which is about not carrying everybody else's crap around inside of us. Protect, which is about developing appropriate boundaries on a strategic level, as well as an energetic and emotional level, and a psychic level where we put up our filters and shields. Then connect, which is about really connecting to something greater than ourselves so that we are not a vacuum to receive or absorb more negativity. And then finally, act, which is really about making choices to be a responsible empath and live in a way that is contributing to the solution instead of reinforcing and amplifying the problem. Because the
mm,
problem with unchecked empaths, with people who are not dealing with being an empath, is that we will contribute to the misery because we absorb
yeah.
it, we pick it up, we're distressed, and then we just broadcast even more misery out into the world. We do
Oh,
not
yeah.
need that right now,
No, we don't.
especially because as empaths, we have as much of a capacity to broadcast as we do to receive. And we
Mm,
can make a choice to broadcast positivity into the world.
absolutely. I think that you should come back.
I would love to.
I
I would love to. Jesse, it feels like,
especially
I mean, I just feel like, well, like as I said, you look very much like my dear deceased middle school friend Ken, who was a middle school theater teacher. And so I automatically was like, oh, he's my kind of person. But you really are my
thank
kind of
you.
person. Like, I
It's
mean,
been
you and
so
I
much
have just
fun.
whizzed through this conversation. It would be an
We
absolute
have.
joy to come back. Yeah.
Yes, I would
Yeah.
love that, especially as your other course comes out.
Yes.
This episode will be aired. People will be listening to this very shortly. I think I'll put it at the
Wonderful.
front of the list. I think, and I want you to come back, talk about the new course and any other updates that you have, because I think we've got a lot more to talk about.
I think we do. Definitely. Jesse, it has been such a blast talking with you. And,
You
so
too.
often I get to be on podcasts that are a little bit more scripted or like, we're like, well, this is what we're going to talk about. And you and I just got to chat about some really interesting things. I imagine some of my people who are probably hearing this podcast, through my social media and through my mailing list and everything are like, wow, I had no idea she was so political. Although, actually, if you've been around my world at any point in time, there's
They
definitely
probably know
moments where I
already.
get
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
political. Yeah,
I think that people who know me would say exactly the same thing.
yeah,
People who
yeah.
know me know exactly where I sit, and yeah, I've made no secret of it on this podcast
Mm-mm.
either. I will call out bullshit when I see it
Right.
straight away. Someone did call me out for that and said that I should think a little bit more about whose problem it is when I'm calling it out. Like, why am I calling out someone's crap? But there's some things where there's no explanation needed, and I will always call that out when I see it.
Well,
So
and I'm a strong believer, I really think that right now that one of the problems with the spiritual culture and spiritual community is that there are a number of people who are getting into what is called spiritual bypassing or what's called light washing, where they're
uh
sort of like just love and light their way through everything and not really acknowledge the issues and not really acknowledge the
yeah.
problems. And the thing is that I feel very strongly that when something is going on and there's a crisis in the world, it is not our job. Like we may need to protect ourselves in the sense of be very mindful of how much exposure or information like I'm not going to hit the repeat button and watch the plane go into the building over and over and over again,
No, of
but
course.
I'm
Yeah.
not going to deny the fact that the plane went into the building. And
That's right.
I
Yeah.
think that the thing is that we need to acknowledge what is happening in order to change it and transform it. So
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
feels very
Yeah.
important to me that we do validate. I actually unsubscribed from a lot of sort of spiritual transformational entrepreneurs and coaches at the beginning of the pandemic because I was really disgusted with the fact that they kept on talking about using the time as an opportunity to pivot and to sell their stuff and to do this, but not really talking about the fact that there were so many people who were losing, had lost their jobs, who had no money, who were terrified, who didn't know where they were going to be living. And it was like, you are
Yeah,
so
yeah.
tone deaf here. You are
How
so tone
selfish.
deaf.
Yeah.
Like, could you
Mm.
please speak to the issue instead of just continuing? I can always, and when a big crisis happens, like when Roe versus Wade just dropped in America, I could tell
Mm.
who had social media schedulers because I could tell by how completely off topic their social
Uh-huh.
media posts were. It was like, hey, look at the cool thing that I'm doing. Come sign up more for my thing. And it's like,
So inappropriate.
it's appropriate. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I understand that you've got a social media calendar and a scheduler, and maybe you're curating stuff in advance. But at the very least, go back in and like unschedule
And see what
something
it
that's
is that you've got
completely off
coming up.
color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I called that, talking without saying anything.
Yes.
That's just that it's just for the pure joy of I can do it too. I can do it with the best of people. There are times where I can spout utter bullshit. No one will know what I'm talking about. And I'm sure a couple of my episodes on this podcast are like that. There have been times where I've struggled to connect with guests. I would never tell them to their face because again, like I said, I always sold this show as being a platform for everyone. I don't have to agree with everything, but I do agree that we can have a discussion respectfully. But sometimes, I just can't get into it, and so
Yeah.
I'll just keep talking. But they definitely don't go for an hour and 40 minutes. So if anybody is still with us now,
I was like, is he going to
you
divide
are
this
our
interview
people.
in half? I was actually wondering if this would end up being like a part one, part two podcast or something. Yeah,
Look, you know what? If people have stuck around for this long, then they're the people that need to
they
be
are our
here. And so,
people.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I hope that they are
Absolutely.
clicking on follow and like and subscribe. And please, empathic sensitivity
Empathicsensitivity.com.
dot
Yep.
com. Yep. And please go also to the book.
Yes, Empathic
It's
Mastery book.
empathic mastery dot
Book.
com, though, isn't it?
Well, and
Empathic Mastery.
empathicmastery.com is just my website. And then, if you want to
Aha.
be taken over to the book, Empathic Mastery book, everything, all things lead to empathic mastery. So if
Fantastic.
you click on empathicmastery.com, you'll get everything, all the rest. And follow me on Facebook, follow me on Instagram, follow me in the
Do it.
places. It's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Why not? And you've got nothing to lose anyway. So.
exactly.
Everything
Exactly.
to gain. Jennifer, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank
Oh
you for
my
joining
God,
us.
Jesse, it has been
Can't wait
such
to
a
have you back.
delight. I can't wait to. It has really been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Oh, thank you.